Today I begin a 5-sermon series on reconsidering judgment. Reconsidering judgment. Today is the first sermon in the series, then we're taking a pause. Next Sunday is Palm Sunday and begins Holy Week. We're all excited about that. And then we have the Palm Sunday services. We've got Maundy, Thursday services. We had to postpone our Passion Experience, but we're having a sunrise service at 6:45 in the morning on Easter Day out at our property where we're doing the picnic today. And then at 8:30 breakfast for those who would like to come, and our 9:30 service and our 11 o'clock service. But then the week after Easter, I'm going to come back to this reconsidering judgment. And judgment is a very uncomfortable topic to talk about. We don't like to think about judgment. You don't hear too many messages on it. And it's actually a very complicated subject. It's not as easy as it may seem on the surface, because people have so many different ideas and beliefs about it. But in this series, I'm going to stick to some very basic aspects related to different parts of judgment. But the connecting thread through all of the messages, all 5 messages, the connecting thread is the character of God. Whatever we say about judgment or aspects of judgment, I want you to look at it in the light of who God is and what God is like. What is God's vision for creation? What is God like? And use that to evaluate whatever beliefs you may entertain about judgment. Today we're going to begin with the foundational affirmation, God is just. God is just. We were singing, that's why our songs today, we're focusing on who God is and what God is like and how great God is. And then after Easter, in the next message, we're going to talk about justice. What is justice and what is the intended outcome of justice? Is it primarily to punish people who do wrong, or is justice about much more than that? Then we're going to focus on the day of the Lord, that day when every single human being is going to have to answer for their lives before God. That is not a very comfortable one, I guarantee you, for any of us. And then the 4th message, to me, is a scary one. I'm going to talk about hell. I have never preached on hell in my life, and it's a scary topic and a difficult topic to get into, and we're going to talk about hell. But then the last sermon of the series, I'm going to talk about heaven. I've never preached about heaven. And I think that's sort of it's basic and yet catches some of the high points that may interest us through that. So let's get started on this series, Reconsidering Judgment. God is just. We have talked about various character traits of God, that God is good, God is holy, God is love, God is true. And now we can add this as a character trait, God is just. Justice is rooted in God's being, just as love is rooted in God's being. And since we said that love penetrates every aspect of creation, these elements that want to connect us, that want us to have communion and fellowship, and it calls us, those of us who have free will and ability to make choices, to make commitments to one another. Justice also penetrates the universe. It's a very part of the fabric of creation because God is just. And our desire for justice isn't just something we humans happen to invent and come up with. It's built into part of who we are and what we expect of life as human beings created in the divine image. So let's take a look. What does it mean when we say God is just? As is so often the case, I find it very helpful as a starting point to go to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. You know, these words that sound so common that we think we use them all day, all the time, and think we know, but so it gives a little more precision to go to a dictionary. And Merriam-Webster says, just means acting or being in conformity with what is morally right, upright, or good. That is, acting in conformity with or being in conformity with what is morally upright or good. So if we apply this to God, saying God is just, we're saying that God's actions and decisions are always in line with what is right and good. Whatever God does, it's going to be right, and it's going to be good. But what or who determines the standards for what is good and what is moral? You know, in our world, there's all kinds of authorities and differences out there. There are different bodies, there are different rules and regulations that provide standards for behavior, whether it's in your work life or whether it's within the state of Florida, the laws of the state, etc. And there are really competing standards sometimes, aren't there? There's not one absolute standard that we all have to abide by. I mean, look, the laws in China are different than the laws of the United States. The laws of Florida are different than the laws in California. There's overlap in things that are the same, but there's plenty of things that are different. And even if we were to look at the rules governing all of the churches in DeBerry, Florida, I bet we would find plenty of differences in terms of standards on that. However, God is the creator. God is the standard of what's good and morally right. God is the standard of what is morally right. God's own being is the standard. It's not something outside of God. It's part of who God is what is right and what is good. There's nothing behind God or above God or behind or beyond God. God, in God's own being, is the standard of what is good. We wouldn't have any idea of what good is if it weren't for God. Our very sense of goodness comes from God, and the same is true with justice. So when we affirm that God is just, we're saying that God is the standard for what is right. And one of the takeaways from this is that God has absolute integrity. That is, God's actions and decisions are always in line with what's morally upright and good. They're always in line with God's being, God's character as just, true, good, holy. God has absolute integrity. God is totally reliable. You never have to wonder if there's some hidden agenda or something a little off. It's always right on because it's rooted in who God is. Now, this affirmation is so different from the gods of the Greco-Roman world and the Mediterranean world in Jesus' day and their time, where they had a whole pantheon, a whole slew of gods. And you've all read some of the stories and the mythology. You've seen movie depictions of different kinds of things, and you know that these gods that are not the creator God, they are creature gods. I talked about that, the difference between the creator God and creature gods. They are creature gods, and they are totally arbitrary and unreliable. They are arbitrary and unreliable, man. They might be nice to you or they might be nasty to you. You never know from one minute to the next. So everybody was always off kilter. They didn't know. My gosh, they had to be scared because you never knew. I'm going to appeal to this God, but how's this God going to respond? I mean, did I catch him on a good day or on a bad day? I mean, even the way the gods treated one another, you read those stories, and they couldn't rely on one another any more than the regular people could. So no wonder people lived in fear and they sought to appease them in different ways because these gods were totally unreliable. To say that God is just is a huge contrast. A huge contrast not only to these gods we talked about in ancient times, but into all the manufactured creature gods in our lives. Those also are very arbitrary and unreliable. But our God, the Creator God, is just. You know, justice in our world may not be totally arbitrary, it's not, but it's very uneven and it's very unequal, isn't it? I mean, if we were to get us started, we were sit around the picnic tables this afternoon and talk about justice in our world, we would see how much unfairness and injustice there is and how even when judgments come out, the outcome is not always just. And it's because we have imperfect people making imperfect laws with imperfect enforcement and imperfect judgment about the whole thing, right? We know that. But the idea that we want justice and we do something to try to bring about justice is related to who God is. The very notion itself is rooted in who God is. Now, justice and being just are a bit different, and I want to clarify the two. To say God is just is a statement about God's character, about who God is and what God is like. Justice involves decision making. It's making a binding decision regarding, in the formal terms, whether one is in line with the standard or not. Okay, did you break the law or did you not break the law, so to speak, right? That's making a judgment is making, and justice in part is making the binding decision, yes, you're in line with the law, or no, you're not in line with the law. But when we say God is just, we're talking about the character of the one who's making the judgments. That's why talking about justice, the very first message in our series, before we talk about justice in any depth, is necessary, because of the character of the one who's making the judgment makes all the difference, doesn't it? Even in our world, the character of the one making those decisions of justice matters tremendously. But because God is just, we know that his decisions are good, they're holy, they're true, they're loving, and they are the right judgments. They're the right decisions. They're reliable. We can take them to the bank, as they say. Well, let's hear some affirmations about God's righteousness and justice. Now, that word righteousness is like a synonym to just. Righteousness is a person who is just, and that's demonstrated in their character, in the way they act, right? Someone who is righteous. They're in line. It's a synonym of just in many ways. Let's see some text about God's righteousness and justice. The first we read this morning, the last line of the scripture text we read in Deuteronomy, says, "The rock, his work is perfect, and all his ways are just. A faithful God without deceit, just and upright is he." This is a fundamental affirmation you find throughout the Bible, that God is just and upright. This is about God's character. Psalm 89:14, "Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Steadfast love and faithfulness go before you." God's character as just and right characterizes the way God exercises his sovereignty or his rule. When God has to govern, when God has to make decisions and do things, we know that those things, whatever God does in carrying out his sovereignty, is right and just. And God is loving and faithful and dependable in all of his dealings with us. Now, Psalm 98:9, "He will judge the world with righteousness and the peoples with equity." God's decisions are in line with what is right. They're fair and they're equitable. They're fair and they're equitable. God shows no partiality. We have that as a goal in ours, but God actually is that way. God doesn't bend the rules a little bit because he likes this one a little more than the other one, or because I'm going to bend the rules a little bit because my interests are going to be adversely affected if I decide in a certain way. That's not the way God is. God judges with equity. Psalm 33, verses 4-5. "For the word of the Lord is upright, and all his work is done in faithfulness. He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord." The psalmist sees that God's righteousness and justice, or God's character, is expressed through justice. It's a manifestation of God's love. So being just, doing justice, are actually, the psalmist is saying, expressions of love. I think so often we think that justice and love are in conflict or can be incompatible at times. But that's not true, because both justice and love, being just and love, are rooted in the very being and character of God. So when God makes a just decision, it is also a loving decision. And finally, we'll read from Isaiah chapter 5, verse 16. "But the Lord of hosts is exalted by justice, and the holy God shows himself holy by righteousness." The prophet is connecting righteousness and justice with God's holiness. God's just character is part of what sets God apart as holy. That's part of his holiness. And not only God is the standard, but God is true to that standard. That's part of what being holy is about, being true to that standard of his own being. So God is just. God's decisions and judgments are never prejudiced or arbitrary or impulsive. They're always aligned with goodness and truth and love. And they're always true to God's character. It's so important to remember these things because sometimes we may disagree with God's decisions, right? But remember who God is and what God is like. A judgment or a decision, binding decision, is not only about is this person in line with the standard or not, but also there's a second part of that decision, which what is the consequence, right? It's like in a law court, they decide the guilt or innocence of the person, and then if they're judged guilty, there is a sentencing of it. There are repercussions to it. We know that consequence and cause and effect are built into the universe, and this is part of the whole justice of God that's built into the fabrics of things. But God, when we're talking about God's ultimate judgments about us, and those consequences, whatever those decisions will be just. I'm not going to talk about reward and punishment today. We will deal with that some in future. But I want to emphasize that whatever rewards or punishments that God may determine, those are just, and they're fair, they're true, and they are the right ones. And the sentences of God that God hands down are compatible with God's holiness and God's goodness and God's love. We may disagree with them from our perspective. We may not like them, but those decisions are the right ones. You see, God has the full picture in view. You and I have, and anyone else has very limited perspective. We don't know all the facts. We don't know the intentions of the heart. There's all kinds of things we don't know. But God knows the consequences and the possibilities and what could happen, what probably will happen. God's decisions are not based on partial information. God cannot be tricked by some slick lawyer. Hallelujah. No one knows more than God. And when we affirm that God is just, we acknowledge that God's decisions are the right ones, and there isn't a better option. But what about us? Okay, we can say God is just, but what about us? Well, if you happen to confess Jesus Christ, if you have put your faith in him, if you have been filled with the Holy Spirit of God and you are a child of God, if you say God is just, that means I am just. Not means I just have to be just in my behavior or my actions. It means being just is a part of who I am. It's a part of my identity as a child of God and a follower of Jesus Christ. Can you take that on? I am just because God is just and I am God's child. I am just. If God is just, we are to be just. It's to describe our character as well. This means that our lives are to be aligned with God. In the way we treat one another, in the decisions we make, in the way we go about our lives, the way we take care of ourselves, the way we take care of other people. Our lives are to be aligned with God. Our character is to be dependable and true, and to the extent that we can, fair and impartial and consistent. Our morality isn't about just obeying rules. It's about living with integrity with who we truly are in Jesus Christ. That we reflect the very character of God, that we are good, we are true, we are holy, we are just. Now, I know that we are imperfect, and I'm the first one here to acknowledge that. But at least we can consciously and purposefully strive to be true to God's character in our personal life and in the institutions that we're a part of where we may actually be involved in making decisions. We may be imperfect, but this very character that we bring into the place whether it be our home or our workplace or wherever we are, is to reflect the character of God. The character and heart and love of God and God's justness is to be reflected in us. Not as something as we try to learn and to tack on and add into our lives as if it's an extra piece of something, but as a part of who we genuinely are as the children of God, filled with His Spirit. So as we reconsider judgment over these several weeks, let's keep in mind today's affirmation. God is just. God is the standard, and God is true to God's own character, always. And if we want to be on the right side of judgment, the right side of those decisions that God will make, then we will align ourselves with God. Let's be true to our identity in Jesus Christ. I leave you with Psalm 33, verse 5. God loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord. Let us pray.